Good day. Welcome to another edition of Ibima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. Before I continue, I urge you to please press the like button. And if you're new to my show, I also urge you to subscribe. I want to ask this question. How do you negotiate with a partner whom you know it's cheating on you? If you're the president of Russia, how do you negotiate with President Trump, knowing that at the time he's making a call with you, at the very same time that he's talking about peace, he may be engineering an attack against you? It's a very confusing situation to think about. And it is a situation where the Russians find themselves now. Because as it so turns out, President Trump is the only person in the West that, unfortunately for them, is engaging with the Russians. So the Russians are in a quaternary. They are worried. They're in a situation where they have to deal with him, but in dealing with him, it may be very detrimental to them. We get more information about how duplicitous the Trump administration is as regards to its engagement with Russia. We had already known that the Trump administration, while negotiations were going on at a time in sometime in June last year, while negotiations were going on with the Russians for peace, Steve Witkoff was shuttling between Moscow and Washington. Operation Spiderweb was launched on the strategic bomber fleet of the Russians. So this is the kind of duplicity we are now beginning to see and identify with the Trump administration. Of course, Iran found out the hard way. And today it emerged in no less a paper than the New York Times that this duplicity has been ongoing for quite a while, because we suddenly noticed how the Ukrainians became very effective in hitting Russian energy assets. They became very, very good at it. They were hitting a lot of refineries and depots. And who has told us what has happened and how did this happen? Turned out it was the CIA. The impression we've been getting over the past year is that America is pivoting away from this war. America is now farming out the war towards being a European project. The Europeans will pay for the weapons, and then the Americans will supply the weapons. That's what we got to understand. And then there was also a caveat also. Some particular forms of American weaponry were not supposed to be used. Long-range missiles that will be used in striking parts in Russia. But it so turned out that the Americans have been giving intelligence to the Ukrainians to use some of their new high-end drones to do damage to the energy infrastructure of the Russians. The New York Times came up with this report today where it said that the US military aid to Ukraine was frozen in March of 2025, but that because it was frozen, the CIA came up with another idea. And that idea was that even though we don't want to give the Ukrainians any more money or any more aid, military aid, can we continue our operations in Ukraine? So we got to hear and we got to read from the New York Times that the CIA has been very active in supporting the Ukrainians with the kind of intelligence they need, specific intelligence, very, very targeted intelligence that ultimately was doing a lot of harm, because the successes the Ukrainians were enjoying in this particular battle against the energy infrastructure of the Russians was one that cost the Russians, by the estimation of the Americans, a total of $75 million per week or per strike of a refinery. So in secret, the Central Intelligence Agency and the US military, with the blessing of supercharged a Ukrainian campaign of drone strikes on Russian oil facilities and tankers to hobble Putin's war machine. We know how these tankers were hit in the Black Sea. They were hit in Even one was hit in Senegal. So this campaign shows us that the CIA was very much involved in the actions of the Ukrainian intelligence. And in June, beleaguered U.S. officials met with the CIA counterparts to help craft more concerted Ukrainian campaign. These are the kind of information that we now get coming off, and they're exclusive. It turns out that it seems like it was a whistleblower that put this information out. The CIA would also be authorized to assist with Ukrainian drone strikes on shadow fleet and vessels in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. So the CIA, from this report, was the one orchestrating. They had their hands completely in it. We already know that the MI6, we have been accusing the MI6 and the British of being a very big part of it. But there's one component, one capability that is very much in the domain of the Americans, and that is the capability for targeting. ISR, they have the satellite data and the specific targeting systems that help these drones to find their targets. Besides, they're also using Starlink in directing the drones. So it's very important now that we get this information, and it creates clarity as to the role the CIA is playing. And today again, in the midst of the attack on the residence of President Putin, at a time President Zelensky was meeting with President Trump, the CIA again has also come in to wade into this particular discourse. The CIA is very much in it. We all know that. And how do we know? Because Ratcliffe told us so. John Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, has come to say that the attack on President Putin was not necessarily on his house or his residence, but on a military facility that was close to his residence in Novgorod. I should point out that the military facility here now is a nuclear weapons center. It is a place from which nuclear weapons are launched across the world. So it's a very important, well-guarded location. So besides the residence of the president of Russia that is being guarded there, there's also a nuclear command center, that's the word, for that is very close to that neighborhood. And the CIA is saying that, yes, they admit that they had a complicity and involvement in this, but it was that center they were trying to attack. And the CIA is trying to shape this narrative. Already we know they have already started to do what the CIA is very good at doing, shaping narrative. And who do they use in shaping narrative? The legacy media, their friends in Washington Times, New York Times, Washington Post, and all the legacy media that tend to parrot the viewpoints of the CIA through anonymous leaks. We know those leaks, anonymous leaks. So today we got this news out here today, and US finds Ukraine didn't target Putin in drone strike. That was one. Then CIA assesses that Ukraine was not targeting Putin in resident strike, contrary to Kremlin claim. That was two. And who's making all these claims, I should point out, is this man, John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe was called, and he went to brief President Trump. And when he went to brief President Trump, he told President Trump about this, and he said that it was not necessarily Putin's house that was being targeted. So I should point out too, though, that the Russians have receipts. They believe very strongly that it was President Putin's residence that was being targeted, and they brought out these receipts. But nevertheless, President Trump was quick to tweet, because it does seem like he has some kind of knowledge of what had happened. And he put out a tweet regarding that. And in that tweet, he accused the president of Trump of Russia of being the one who is fermenting a lot of trouble. So this now is clear. The CIA has complicity in it. They have an involvement in it. They've been caught. And what they're saying is that we did not attack the house of the president of Russia. What we did is that we attacked or helped the Ukrainians, because they now use very high-powered, very effective drones that it assembled in Europe, and of course, with the competence and know-how of the Americans and the Europeans, it was such a drone that was used. A swarm of them, 95, one drones were ultimately used in this attack. But the Russians are not, they have receipts, like I said. And what did they do today? Today, they showed us those receipts. They called the military attaché of the United States Embassy in Moscow, and they handed him evidence that shows what they want, what kind of recovery they made.
Я пригласил вас по важному вопросу, хотим вас проинформировать. Мы нашли обломки беспилотных летательных аппаратов,
So data from the drone that attempted on the attack on the presidential residence was handed over to the representative of the military attaché's office in the U.S. Embassy, and decoding the control systems of the Ukrainian drone shut down showed that they were targeting the complex of the buildings. The whole programming of that particular controller was that they were all headed, because as it turns out, even though these drones were very capable drones, they were very powerful drones. This is the controller that is in question here. They were also, the Russians were able to decrypt the information in it, and it was in that, through that process that they knew that this was the target. President Putin's residence was the target. The drone's flight controller is 7H43 Wing V3. Whatever that means, those people who understand electronics will know more about it. So the Ukrainians, President Zelensky has already denied. But yesterday I did a show where I told you about the response of the Europeans. They know for sure that this is a different kind of escalation, especially as the rhetoric of the Russians have suddenly hardened. They are now doing their best to gather information. They are being meticulous, giving up the evidence to the Americans in such a manner that by the time they take action, it will be on a balance as they see it. So they are taking action, they are recording everything, and they are being meticulous before they take a revenge. The retaliation they say they are going to take is yet to come, but they've stated that it will be undiplomatic. Maria Zakharova has said that it will, and they also said, while they have clear indications of the locations and the targets and the dates, they're not going to let anybody know about it. This is also coming out on a day that today, just while some countries, people were celebrating New Year, there was a big attack in Kherson that killed 24 people. And that attack, the governor, Vladimir Saldo, said in a post that 3 UAVs, one of which allegedly carried CDRA mixture, hit a crowd-led venue in a nightclub. I think it was a club, and it killed some people, including a child. So the Russians have been very, very, very hard pressed about it. They've been, all the political leaders in Russia have been very, they've been saying strong words about this attack. And the interesting thing about this attack is that this attack, on a day like this, with all big consequence, one that had 50 people injured and had 24 people dead in Russia, it appeared not even in a single media in the West. For illustration purposes also, sometimes it's good to let us know how the narrative is shaped across two divides. There is a war, and the media is used in persecuting this war. You may think the media is an innocent part of this one player. No, but they have agendas and they have narratives that they are trying to shape. This is the front of the BBC today, just before the program, and it concentrates more about the fire that happened in a bar in Switzerland. There was no talk of any attack in Russia, and all the news, one is about Iran, and the other one also is about healthcare. Zelensky's peace plan is almost ready and all that. I should also point out that on the day that the Russians are claiming that Zelensky attacked them, Putin's residence, the headline of the BBC was one that emphasized the denial of Zelensky rather than the point of view of the Russians. This is also CNN, and CNN also carries this news about the Swiss campaign, but nothing about what may have happened in Quezon. So this is how they shape the narrative in the West, and of course it's continuing. They continue to insist. The boogeyman is Russia. Russia is the bad actor here, and they don't want to give them any media. There should be no sympathy, and all humanity should be thrown away after all. The Ukrainians also say the Russians carried out a strike against them. And who is making this claim? It is Zelensky. But before he made his claim, there has been some response, like I'd already said. And the images of the people who were killed were put out on social media. On media, it was distributed by the governor. It was a harrowing view for a lot of people. Quite a lot of people were killed in this fire that took these lives. And so it has created a lot of emotions within Russia. And for that reason, their political class has come up very strongly to say that the person who we know who makes such strong statements usually, Dmitry Medvedev. Medvedev says that the Banderite bastards should be slaughtered like sick pigs in revenge. And they know that imminent revenge is imminent and that it will come, especially for the Kherson civilians massacred. He also said something very ominous. In another tweet again in Telegram, he said, after the imminent death of Zelensky, I suggest displaying his preserved body for scientific purpose at a museum in the city of St. Petersburg. He called the museum. It's quite long. I don't want to say much about it. Already we know that he had said that there will be revenge and that Zelensky will be in hiding now for the rest of his life. That is what he had said in another post. He's been very, very hawkish about the response that the Russians should take. Well, the Russian State Duma deputy, his name is Gorolev, he also said Zelensky is a terrorist and his inner circle must be eliminated. There's no other option. President Putin has had to manage this group of people in his political circles, and they are getting more stringent in their voices. They want a complete and comprehensive destruction of the Ukrainian state. Most people who know President Putin and who are close to him say that he is the voice of calm, and he's the one who is holding back a continually growing horde of hawkish politicians around him. Anyway, one of the things that did happen is that Zelensky said in his own form too, he also stated that they were attacked and that a lot of this attack was carried out by the Russians. He put out a tweet where he showed 200 drones were used against the Ukrainians on New Year Day. And this is how he summarized it. So he put out a tweet of how his country was being attacked on New Year Day and how the Russians used 200 drones to bring pain to the people of Ukraine. This is going on while there's a concerted effort. The effort now for security guarantees for Ukraine is increasing. Somehow, the Americans, the French, the Germans, and every other person believe that there will soon be a ceasefire. I doubt if that will happen because the Russians have said they're not going to use the option of ceasefire. They have memory, historical memory that makes them remember Minsk I and Minsk II and all the promises of Ukrainian disarmament that was not kept, and rather how Ukraine was armed and trained to finally come and fight again. They also remember the Istanbul Agreement that was scuttled. So Macron is talking about protecting Ukraine. Metz is talking about protecting Ukraine. But Alexander Stubb also. And even the other day, I talked about how Budanov is saying that they must have start to look towards ending this war. But Metz is coming off of what President Trump had, because President Zelensky said this in front of President Trump. Obviously, America has promised them 100% guarantees, security guarantees. What is the kind of guarantees they're asking for? One where if Russia attacks Ukraine again, there will be something very close to Article 5. The response will be one that will be close to Article 5, both economically and militarily. That's the kind of guarantee that is being assured the Ukrainians in America. And these guarantees now will be enshrined and made an act of parliament to pass through as an article, and it will come out as a bill. That is what the Ukrainians want, and that is what they will get. It will be expedited, because I should tell you, if anything comes into the American Congress regarding support for Ukraine, it will pass through expeditiously, very fast. So that's just how it is. He's assured of it. I think there are some niggling points regarding that kind of guarantees also for the Europeans. Somehow it seems like not all of them have agreed. So, because he said there are 95% agreement in that security guarantee. They're still working out the framework of how they will deploy to Ukraine and under what circumstances they will deploy, because Umerov has been saying that he's been meeting with the national security advisors of Britain, France, Germany, and Finland, and quite a number of them. He had a long list of them. They've been discussing with them, they've been making calls. And as President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in the midst of all this, and all these machinations are going on, you start to wonder whether he's been carried along or whether he's been strung on as a player who just doesn't know what he should be doing. He may actively be seeking peace, or think that he's been sent on a peace mission. After all, we didn't hear much from Kirill Dimitrov in this past few days, and he has not said anything. I have not seen any tweet of his regarding the attack on President Putin's residence. The talk of escalation may just be a big worry for him, because, as I had said already, President Trump had put out a tweet where he accused President Putin of being the one who is creating the war. And this is that tweet. He put it out there and he says that it was President Putin. Putin's attack bluster shows Russia is the one standing in the way of peace. And that was a report from the New York Post. So he has a view. Whatever it is, like I said, President Trump has become duplicitous. We really don't know his intent. He allowed himself to be convinced by the CIA to carry out an operation there. We should remember that when the Maidan Revolution became successful, the CIA deployed very extensively into Ukraine, and they have about 8 bases now, 12 bases, if not more, in Ukraine. Very active, and they're working very actively with the GRU and Budunov. Budunov has their support. Budunov, of course, is enjoying the support of not just the CIA, also the MI6. The MI6 has sworn that they are going to put pain on Russia until Russia comes to the negotiating table. That is what the head of the MI6 has said. So in his New Year's speech, the same too for MES, Macron said that Ukraine must be protected. French president mentioned Ukraine in his New Year's speech. He said on January 6th in Paris, European countries will make commitments to protect Ukraine. The president of France stated that Europe must accelerate the strengthening of its own defense, because we now see that America has pivoted away. NATO used to be the full and complete responsibility of America. Somehow, whatever the thinking was then, so the other partners in NATO were not meeting up their own side of the deal. It was completely funded and financed by the Americans, and that's what President Trump has done. J.D. Vance and most of the politicians around President Trump are like they should move away from Europe. And indeed, they've started to move away from Europe. So Macron wanted to say that in just a few days, European states and allies will agree on concrete steps. He says they should start to look towards. He also called on developing EU's independence in key areas: the defense industry, agriculture, space, quantum technologies, and artificial intelligence. I wish them well. somehow Europe is now not too far away from Africa. They are just not too far away from Africa. They may not know it, but they are that far away from the kind of movement that this world is seeing in China and in America. These are the two countries that are moving innovation and technology forward. The other Europeans, they used to have it. They are legacy builders of innovative products. They've been left behind. They've been left behind. And it's a bad case for them too now because America is a competitor. Chinese are competitors. And in both realities, they'll be crushed. Anyway, going forward now, one other person who is beginning to see reality about what the war is going. He knows how engaging with the Russians has not been historically a good thing for his country. And that's Alexander Stubb of Finland. He knows. I have said that Alexander Stubb is the one president or prime minister who has a buyer's remorse. For several years, they were in good relationship with Russia. It was forced on them because of the peace deal that was forced on them following the war they fought with the Russians prior to World War II. But they have managed it. Their economies got linked, and now we see that cleavage is causing pain even to their citizens. Those ones around the border with Russia, whose economy have collapsed because the Finns have finally closed those borders. They've tightened up all relationship with Russia, and they're having some blowback against their economy because of that. It was an economy that was beneficial to them, and now they're having this blowback. Alexander Stubb said, peace is often a compromise. Not all parts of peace agreement will necessarily correspond to our understanding of law. Our goal is a functional and peaceful relationship with Russia. That's the kind of peace we're looking for Ukraine. Anyway, Sweden is worried. The Baltic countries are worried. And why are they worried? The talk of peace is one that makes them realize that once there's peace, Russia will try to bolster its own borders and will start to remember them. One of the Swedish leaders was also talking about how if this war ends, Russia will look their way. They're all worried. Latvia is worried. Estonia is worried. Lithuania is worried. I should point out that Lithuania actually just signed a contract with the Russians to extend the pipeline passing through their territory to Kaliningrad. At least there's some commercial business going on still between these belligerents. Anyway, regarding the battle situation, the news I have is about the death of an Australian mercenary. He fought for the Ukrainian army and he has been eliminated in the Donesk People's Republic. Must be somewhere within probably Pokrovsk or maybe Minograd, and he was killed. His friend is the one who announced his demise. And this is a picture of the unfortunate former mercenary now, because obviously he's joining a long list of Ukrainian foreign legion that have been eliminated. His friend announces that according to the man, Wilson was killed while carrying out combat mission, and he was due to get married in a week. Australian authorities said they are aware of Wilson's death and are seeking official confirmation from the Ukrainian side. Yeah. So obviously they are aware he has died. And the other day I reported about how three Americans were killed, and the Britons also have been losing some people. Most of the international legion are fleeing. They are not comfortable with the new realities they are seeing, the rapid pace of movement of the Russians. And this rapid pace, I can say, is happening very fast now in the Gallipoli area. At least the Gallipoli area, a lot of movement has happened there over the past 24 hours, just as there's also been a lot of movement within the Sumy area. In the Sumy area, Ukrainian armed forces repelled some attack by the Russians in a city called Rezione, but the Russians somehow occupied all the forested area within that area, and we know that when the Russians are in the forest, it's not a good thing. It's never a good thing because it is from there that they have a maneuver now that they move in very small units. They don't move a big mechanized column. These days, the way the maneuvers is in the battlefield, you will even think that a mechanized column moving in a particular order, knowing that they are going to be destroyed, may just be a ruse. It may just be a ruse, the way I look at it now, because in Seversk, the Russians won by stealing into Seversk in 1 and 2 little companies, infantrymen just crawling into the cities, forming critical mass, and then attacking. That's the way the war has shaped now. This is where I'll end my video for today, but not before saying that Orekov, though, is also beginning to feel embattled. They are getting close to Orekov just as they are moving in Zaporizhia. This is where I'll end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any views regarding the opinions I just expressed, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until my next video, you have a good day.